Okay, this is an instructional video on how to do the mapping step on a Eufy E15 and E18 mower when you have to create virtual boundaries in your yard during the mapping process. If your lawn is completely enclosed by physical barriers like driveways, sidewalks, retaining walls, fences, whatever, you don't need this video. But if your yard is like mine, where 3 of the 4 boundaries are shared grass with my neighbors, then this video may be helpful for you because I wasn't able to find any detailed instructions on how to do this. So a couple things to start with. First of all, if you have a tablet that you can run the app on and to do the mapping process, I strongly recommend it because you're going to need to see what's going on and you're going to need to draw virtual boundaries with your finger, and a bigger screen size is helpful for that. The Eufy people will tell you that you only need good Wi-Fi coverage at the dock, but the truth is that it's best if you have good Wi-Fi coverage for your whole yard. And the reason for that is because if the mower is connected to Wi-Fi all the time, it can give updates to the app, which shows how much has been mowed and where the mower is. That's very helpful during the mapping process, because if you lose contact with the mower during the mapping process, it will still map, but you may not know what it's doing from the app standpoint. And also, what I didn't realize at the time, but 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi would be the best instead of the 2.4, because there are some things that take a long time to do over 2.4. Before you start the mapping process, you're going to want to check the unit setting in the app to make sure it's metric or US, depending on where you are, so that when you see the dimensions on the map, they're in something you understand. Second of all, for the virtual boundaries that you're going to have to draw, which is any boundary you share with your neighbors without a physical barrier, you need to know how long those boundaries are. 80 feet, 110 feet, whatever, because you're going to have to make sure that you draw a virtual boundary that is at least as long as the physical boundary, and I would suggest much longer, 10-20% longer. The reason for that is that when you're doing the mapping process, the map in the app will have no reference points whatsoever. No compass points, no physical stuff from your yard. It's just, the only thing you're going to see is the path that the mower has covered so far. So you don't have any reference points. So when you draw that boundary and place it, you're going to be unsure exactly where to put it. And if you don't make it long enough, at the end, it's going to, the mower is going to get to the end of it and escape through the hole that you left or the end of it. So be prepared to know what the boundaries are, what the length are, and to draw them larger than what they really are. The mapping, the Eufy literature says that mapping can take hours, and you should believe it. You should be prepared to spend some hours, and chances are you're going to want to be outside for most of the mapping process, especially until you get all the virtual boundaries drawn. So what you should do to start with is decide which virtual boundary you would like to draw first. Then go into the app for the settings for the mower and decide on the direction you want it to travel. The mowing direction is the direction it travels when it's doing the mapping. North, south, east, west, diagonal, whatever. So think about that and think about which direction you want the mower to go out of the dock, and set it that way. So when it comes out of the dock, it's going to travel in the direction of mowing like it's doing right now, and it's going to go straight out away from the dock. And if you set the mowing direction right, it's going to head right for the boundary you selected. you're going to want to be prepared to pause it when it reaches that point where the boundary is. So when it turns around here, you're gonna, and then you'll see where I have drawn my virtual boundary. When it gets to the point where you want to have the virtual boundary, you're going to pause it in the app. You're going to edit the map, and you're going to draw a virtual boundary to be perpendicular to the path that it has traveled so far. Now, there's something here I need to caution you about. When you're thinking about where you're going to place these virtual boundaries, well, first of all, let me say, so if I wanted this, see this mound here, I don't want it to mow. I told it that I created that virtual boundary right there. And that's why it's turning around whenever it gets to it. When you're thinking about where these virtual boundaries are going to be, you want to think about them being as far out in your yard as you can live with in the short term. Doesn't mean that you have to mow all that, but you should set the boundaries to be whatever you'll ever possibly want it to mow. So for my neighbors, I don't want them to mow their yard, but this easement here, I've already changed my mind about. But since the map is drawn with a virtual boundary right here, I can't get it to mow on this mound here unless I redo the mapping process, which is ugly. So put the boundaries out far, let it finish the mapping process, and then move them in before you do your first mowing. Okay, so it comes out of the dock, it heads to a boundary, you pause it, you draw a virtual boundary perpendicular to the direction of travel, longer than the distance, longer than the length of the real physical boundary, and do your best job trying to get it perpendicular. Like I say, there's no reference points in the map, so you're just gonna have to do the best you can. Let it continue the mapping with that new virtual boundary, then be prepared for it. If you have other virtual boundaries, be prepared to do the same thing for those. You do not want to move a virtual boundary during the mapping process once you've created it. I mean, you pause it, you create the virtual boundary, you mess around with it to get it as best you can, and then you resume the mapping. Once you resume the mapping, don't move it again. Especially not in, because I did that once and it got really screwed up and started doing weird things, and I had to abort and start over. Maybe they fixed that by now. If it comes out of the dock and heads for the boundary, and there's only a single path that you have to work with, when you pause it, you may not see anything on the screen right away because it takes a few seconds for the map to refresh. Just wait for it, and what you should see is a single path with the mower at the end of it. So don't be alarmed that there's nothing there. Wait for it, and then you can draw your virtual boundary. Then once the mapping is completed, and you're doing your first mowing, you can tweak the boundaries. Then you can move them in. I don't know about moving them out, because if you move them out, you're increasing the map area, and I don't know if that's going to trigger a remap or not. But if you put hours into this map, you don't want to do that haphazardly. So you can move them in if you want, if you decide that they're out too far, and before your first mowing. One other tip before I end this video, I suggest that you create zones in your yard for mowing. The first time I mowed, before I created zones, it tried to do the whole yard, and it did it in an illogical fashion, and there were multiple trips to the dock, costly trips to the dock for recharging, and it just really didn't work very well. For me, it works much better if you create zones and then select the zones you want to mow. After a while, you'll know when it needs to be recharged, and then just do it that way. If you decide later that I want to do the whole yard, you can still select all the zones. Okay, that's all I've got for this. I hope it was helpful. I sure wish I had this video before I had done it. So good luck.